Okay, welcome guys. This is another episode of Learning with Kai. And today I'm super happy to have Jackson Morgan, who is, on LinkedIn, it says he's a freelance software engineer for Solid. So welcome, Jackson.
Hello.
Now, you're located in New York, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in New York right now. I'm doing a little bit of a bounce around because I can work remotely. I can live wherever I want. So for 2021, New York's the choice.
Nice. Before we go to Solid, I'd like to know you a little bit. So I wonder if you could be so kind to take us back to when you were maybe 10 years old. Where were you living? Yeah, surprise, right? So where
Okay,
where
so
were you living? What were you living, and what was fun when you were 10?
got it. So 10 years old is about fifth grade, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something
Could
like that.
could be
Or I
9,
guess
could be 11.
fifth grade in the U.S. I'm not necessarily sure what the other grade systems are. So when I was 10 years old, I had just moved from um, Wisconsin to Georgia. So I was getting used to new things, and one of the things that I started to get into as I was adapting to this new school is what kind of new academic things, what kind of new extracurriculars should I do? I did things like Boy Scouts up in Wisconsin, but I started to get interested in some of the more tech-oriented things going into fifth grade and middle school. It wasn't necessarily a computer science related thing. It was things like something called Science Olympiad, or there was another thing that I was really into called Future City Design, which was
Ah,
a which was a club where you build a scale model of a future city, and then you start to envision all of the cool things that could happen in that city. So we had some real out there ideas like, oh, what if we could regulate temperature by all living underground, sort of like how they do out in the deserts of Australia, um, in order to help with air conditioning costs so that your city could be more energy efficient. So that was a lot of fun. Never really got to any of the national levels, but that was a bit of my middle school career there.
thank you, thank you. And I'm going to keep you there for just a little bit. Uh, at that age, around plus minus a few, were there some person that had an influence on you? Could be, an uncle, or an aunt, or a parent, or a friend. Was there some?
Uh,
Sometimes at that age, things happen. There's we start to be more aware, and yeah. So, did you have any such influencers at that early
yeah,
stage?
I guess I just need to thank my parents for encouraging me to do any kind of extracurricular activity. Well, maybe they were a little bit restrictive in what I could do. It's good that I liked the engineering-based things because my dad's an engineer, so he pushed me towards the engineering-based things. So it's good to have a few things that you can try out. Um,
Ah,
one I funnily enough, oh, sorry if you can hear that. That's just the
that's New York.
problem of being in New York. Yeah. Um, Funnily enough, around eighth grade in middle school, one thing that had a big influence on me was just starting to watch Star Trek. Uh,
All right.
I, I I enjoyed all the character interactions and how a bunch of smart people can come together to solve really tough problems.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think many people, especially in the U.S., it's not been in Europe. It's not been like on TV, I guess, when I was a child. But in the U.S., I think many people have had, been influenced by Star Trek. Yeah, that's great. All right, thank you for. Sorry for that. But I kind of like to get to know people a little bit, and
Yeah.
that I think that works. So, but I have let's go back to more recent than maybe. Uh, so now you're an expert on Solid. What when did you first become interested in Solid? What was it that in Solid that say, wow, this is maybe something that I'll be interested in?
Well, so there's actually a long history with me and Solid, and it dates back before Solid with the
Yeah,
semantic
go
web.
for it.
Um, so in college, I took a class called Intro to Computational Media. And part of that class was talking about ways that we envisioned computing in the future, in the past. So they were talking, we were talking about things like Turing's tape machines, and there was something called Codex, which was this sort of desk-based interface. And one of the things that we learned about was this concept called the semantic web, which was the next gen. It was supposed to be the next generation of the web. It was popular in the early 2000s. It was all about connecting data rather than connecting websites. I thought it was really cool when I learned about it, but I knew that it had some severe limitations. And actually, funnily enough, my final paper for that class was a paper where I wrote about how the semantic web could never work, and I called out Tim Berners-Lee in it, saying that this dream isn't possible, and I listed out the reasons.
Do you remember a good reason, like one of the main?
Yeah. So there are big problems around getting people to agree on how to structure data. When there are 50 different ways that you could create a person object for 50 different organizations, well, more than 50 ways. Every organization has a different way to structure a person. Some people might have social media posts. Some people might be customers that pay for things. And the semantic web does have certain things that can solve this. Tim calls it a bag of chips, where you can have a node, and that node can have any number of attributes on it. However, even if you have that, there's still problems with synonymous terms. So maybe one organization says that a person has a name, but another organization is a person that has a title, and those two, while they may be synonymous, from a computational level, you can't actually reconcile those two. So that's one of the big problems when it comes to the semantic web, and it's an acknowledged problem. So when we're talking about the semantic web, one of the main ways that people looked at solving that in the past was something called a rule engine. And a rule engine worked by making inferences. So you could imagine an inference like, if I have a father and I'm here, and that father has a brother, then I can have a rule engine that makes an inference that says that this person is my uncle. So it's simple on the surface, but when you start trying to play around with it and say, hey, all of the problems that we have with reconciling all these data types will be solved by rule engines, we get to what is called an AI hard problem. And an AI hard problem is sort of like, if you're familiar with computer science, there's something called an NP hard problem, which is just a very computationally complex problem. And an AI hard problem is even more complex, because it means we basically need a general AI that can do everything that a human can do in order to fix this. So we started working on the semantic web community tried to solve this with rule engines, but maybe about 20 years in, we're starting to realize this isn't necessarily the way to go about things. And thus we have the rise of schemas and shape validation languages like Shackle and Shex. And I think that that's the future there. So despite what I may have said in my paper years ago for that class, I think that we are on track to bring the semantic web into something that is computationally possible now.
All right. That's exciting. So, right. Yeah, you had another idea?
Yeah, well, I guess this was coming off the stack to just how did I get involved with Solid in general.
Yeah. Okay. So when was it then you first were introduced to Solid as Solid? That part.
There was so I kind of put the semantic web on the shelf and started working on a few different things. I was always interested in data and the way data was structured. And in one summer, I decided to try to build a data platform where people could upload data and get data back. And I realized I got a few hundred signups on it, but I realized that people really didn't want to contribute data to it. They just wanted to get data out of it. And just the amount of work that I was putting into putting data into it it just wasn't scalable. So I realized the problem with this is centralized data. And it sparked my mind about the semantic web again. I said, oh, wait, I remember the semantic web being decentralized data. Let me start reading about this again. At the same time, I started work at another company. I was the head of architecture for a marketing analytics company. But I was still really interested in semantic data. So while I was at that company, I started writing a few posters for some semantic web conferences. Now, if you're familiar with the academic circuit, if you make a poster versus a paper, usually posters get accepted into conferences because they're a much lower bar for acceptance. And if I were to tell you to go and look at my posters now, I'm kind of a little bit, I wouldn't agree with the things that I said in that poster, but it was a good experience to kind of get into the semantic web community. So I went to a couple of conferences. I went to one conference in Portugal, met a lot of great people in the semantic web community, and then in the second conference I went to, which was out in Monterey, California, I got into that was the International Semantic Web Conference. And the very first thing that I wanted to go to, very first event that I wanted to go to, I was walking around the campus, and a guy comes up to me and says, oh, do you know where this room is? I'm going to this event. And I said, oh yeah, I'm going to that event too. You can just follow me. I see where it is on the map here. So we went there and we sat down, and all of the speakers at the event started referring to him, saying as if he was something really special. And then I started to notice, wait, inventor of the web, is this Tim Berners-Lee? So I looked up a picture of Tim Berners-Lee on my phone and looked to my side, and oh my gosh, it is Tim Berners-Lee. So eventually Tim got up and with his colleague Ruben Verbo gave a presentation about Solid. And I thought, this is amazing. I love this idea of decentralized data. It's part of the problem that I was experiencing before with my other platform, where I wanted to get away from centralized data. And at that point, I said, you know what I want to do? I want to do work. I want to spend the next year of my life or so doing work on Solid. So I talked a little bit with Tim, but more importantly, I talked with Professor Ruben Verbo. He said, he gave me a lot of introductions to the Solid Dev tools. And after a great conference, I went home, and at that point, I had decided to leave my job with marketing analytics because I thought Solid is such a cool thing, and it could be the future. And I started building some open source tools on top of Solid. And I shared those tools with Professor Rubin, and he said, hey, this is pretty cool. You know, Tim's got this new company called Inrupt, and they're looking to hire some people. Why don't you go ahead and talk with them? So at that point, I flew up to Boston, talked with Inrupt, and I was also looking for perhaps seeing if there were other gigs in a more data-oriented space around there, but nothing compared to Inrupt as a gig that I would want to take at that time. So eventually I joined Inrupt. I was the 8th employee there, and yeah, that's how I got into the Solid community.
That's great. Now, so maybe you could tell us what Solid is. I mean, not everybody, far from everybody knows what Solid is, right? So what is this? Now, I can let sort of the viewers know that we at Graphmetrics are heavily using Solid, and that's why I am on this quest to learn more about it, and why I contacted Jackson here to learn more about it. So Could you inform us all? Tell us what is Solid? What is that about?
Yeah. So the concept of Solid is really simple. And a lot of people call it a decentralized ecosystem, but I call it a me-centralized ecosystem. Because unlike other decentralized systems, it is still centralizing around something. It's centralizing around the individual rather than around the company or application. So imagine if instead of taking your data and putting it on Facebook servers or putting it on LinkedIn servers, all of your data was centralized around yourself. You have your own personal online data store that every application that's Solid compatible feeds into. And eventually, this can lead to some amazing things. You could imagine how many times do you need to re-enter in data? Multiple times.
So if I were to use some Facebook-like app, but it was Solid-based, how would that work?
Yeah, you could. So if I want to make a social media post, I would use a Solid compatible social media app, and I create that post, and it gets, instead of getting saved on a centralized server with a company, it gets saved onto a data store that I have chosen. That data store could be anything from a cloud host that I trust, or just a computer that's in my house. It all works the same way. So Solid allows you to have choice. And because of that, now that the data isn't bound to the application, any application that's Solid compatible that can render social media posts can get that. So maybe I prefer one kind of social media application, but my friends prefer another kind of social media application. It all works fine because everything's interoperable. You can make a post on one and all of my friends can see it on another, which is all going into this tune of choice that Solid enables.
All right. So then how can like the Facebook make money on you? The Facebook-like company.
It becomes harder for them to do because Solid is all about choice and consent. Now, obviously, because it's about choice, you have control over your data. So if you want to have targeted advertising, which is the way that Facebook makes most of its money, you can still have targeted advertising. You can grant access to all of your data to Facebook. But then comes the question, why would you do that?
I don't know. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, so you could see a future where if you want targeted advertising, these companies now need to come to you and give you something in return. The world of just monopolizing your data is over. So you could imagine targeted advertising in the future would be, by default, you don't have it. But maybe some company will come to you and say, hey, I would love to provide you with some relevant ads to you. I know I'm going to be making some money off of it, but this data is valuable to you, so I will give you a cut of the profit. So imagine being able to make money off of sharing your data in order to get targeted advertising. That's one possibility, but in the future, we don't have to live in a world where you have to do that. You can decide to do whatever you want with your data. It's your data.
So like, I know like on YouTube today, for instance, there's a lot of censorship. Mm-hmm. So how would we censor like if we had a YouTube-like service, a video service, and I upload my video, I would upload it to my pod, and then share it. Is that how it works?
Exactly. So you can imagine Solid isn't like a centralized platform. So you can think of it as like the web. Really, no one censors the web in general. Well, certain governments censor the web in general, but from a technical standpoint, there's really nothing you can do to stop them from also censoring the solid web. But philosophically, no one censors the web in general. You could, as individual applications, you could censor those individual applications, but that means that I'm not going to completely be able to remove a video from someone's solid pod. Someone can put that video up there, and if there's a social media application, that social media application can decide whether or not to spread that video, but there's nothing that's going to take down your video in general. So Solid is a technology that's about building out an ecosystem. And we'll have an ecosystem where you will be able to get access to all of this data through different applications. So when it comes to censorship, you can choose the application that has the censorship ideology that you agree with.
Nice. Okay, so you say Solid is a technology. Could you elaborate a little bit? Like, what is it? I know it's not an app. It's
Right.
or
It's a
standards and
technology.
things, right?
Yeah, it's a technology ecosystem that contains three big portions. The first portion is the personal online data store, which we talked about before. That's where you're storing all of your data. The second is your identity. Your identity is what allows you to get access to certain pieces of information because the personal online data store has an access control system. And then the third
Personal online data store is
Right.
an acronym
pod.
we use pod, right? Data
Yes.
pod. Yeah.
Exactly, a data pod. Yes, and then the third thing in the Solid ecosystem is the big suite of applications that is small right now, but it is growing, and we have and all of these applications are Solid compatible. So you use an application and you log in with your identity to access the data on your pod, and that's the Solid protocol at a high level. So there are specifications to make sure that all applications, pods, and identities all can work together. And just like how there are specifications for the web, there are many implementations of those specifications.
So and so Tim Berners-Lee, he invented the World Wide Web standards. Is that correct, or is that?
Yep. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
how does this build on that? How does Solid build on the World Wide Web standards?
Well, it's based on all of the same protocols, so we don't need to reinvent HTTP. It's based on HTTP when you're making all of your requests. It's based on a lot of the best practices that we've learned from developing on the web. It taps into the semantic web stuff before. It also, the identity system taps into other popular identity systems that we work on before, namely OIDC, which if you're familiar with that's the same identity system that allows you to sign in with Google and sign in with Twitter. So you're able to sign in with a Solid. So one of the great things about Solid, when we're comparing it to other decentralized technologies, is that it's based on technology that has already been proven. The web is the most scaled system that has ever existed in human history, and we're basing it on the same technology there. It's not something completely new, like blockchain technology with a proof of work. It's based on client-server relationships, which we are all very familiar with. The main difference that we're doing is now we're making it so that data doesn't need to live in a silo, and data can be oriented around the individual. But those are the main innovations, and we know that we can scale it because it's based on technology that's been scalable before.
So you mentioned there were some apps built for this Solid, according to this Solid standards that can connect to the Solid pods. And if I'm not mistaken, you have recently yourself built an app. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah. So when I look at the Solid ecosystem, I want to have an app that people could see themselves as using every day. And some low-hanging fruit for that, like if I take my habits into account, is a chat app. I use chat apps every day to talk to my friends. So I decided, let's make a chat app that feels, well, solid, and make it so that everyone on Solid can use it. So the app that I created is called Liqid Chat. That is Liquid without a U, Liqid. You can just Google that or look it up in the App Store or the Play Store. And Liqid Chat has all the features that you'd expect. As I mentioned before, it has mobile support so that you can get things on the go as long as you have an Android or iOS device. Sorry, Windows Phone users, all three of you who still exist. We have push notifications so you can get alerted on the go. You're able to search through all of your friends in order to find them and start chats with them. But the big thing that differentiates it from other kinds of chat apps is the fact that you can put your data on Solid. You can put your data in Solid pods, and it's not stored on the servers of Facebook or on the servers of LinkedIn.
So if I have a pod and then I use Liqid Chat and I chat, then that information, I understand, comes to my pod, and then can I use those chats? And I think you can upload pictures too, right? So those
Yep.
chats and those pictures, are they only for that chat, or how does that work?
Yeah, so Liqid Chat is designed to be completely what is called interoperable, which just means that that it can work with other applications. It's completely interoperable with other Solid applications out there that are also in chat. The most used one of those is the data browser chat. If you're familiar, the data browser is a project that was created at MIT when Solid was still an academic project. It's an interesting user interface that maybe needs a bit of updating, but it's still the most used chat. So Liqid Chat structures its data in the exact same way as that one. So if you prefer the data browser chat, you can still use Liqid Chat. I also
Could you use it? Could you use it for other things? Could
Like-
you use it, like, I don't know, write a paper, and you remember, oh, I had a post, and or
Sure.
picture to let's say you have a picture photo album kind of online. Is that data there for that, or is it only
the
for the
data's
chat?
in your pod. So as long as you're able to find the location of that data in your pod, go ahead, use it all you want.
Yeah.
You can link to images, you can link to messages. So if you had a client that was you're writing a paper, and if you had a client that was able to render messages, then you could just send a link to that message. There's still a lot of work when it comes to building user interfaces to leverage this kind of rich data. But you can potentially do that given a client exists. It's not confined to just Liqid Chat. You can use that data for whatever you want.
Nice. And so I think you've told me you're interested in that space, like you just said, apps that you can use on a daily basis, like chat. What's your future plan? Are you gonna keep developing that app, or do you have other apps in mind that you're gonna develop?
Yeah, I want to build apps for people on Solid, and there are obviously a bunch of things that can be done there. For now, I'm working on Liqid Chat because I think that's and I want to do an experiment to see how many people can I get onto a Solid app. But if Liqid Chat goes well, there's a bunch of other things that can be developed for Solid consumers. You could imagine things going into more of a social media space. You could imagine things going into like document creation or other kinds of great consumer-oriented products. At the moment, my focus is Liqid Chat, but I obviously want to expand to other places.
So now, maybe I'm already asked, but I'm really interested in this. So, your interest is to build solid apps for that space. Again, why solid? Why not apps for that space that are great? What is it that's solid? Why is that so important to you?
Yeah. So when it comes to this concept of me-centralization, data interoperability, those are the things that I care about a lot. And I think that that's the future of where our data needs to go. The way our data is structured right now is a bit of an embarrassment. The fact that everything's behind a RESTful API, that an engineer needs to read documentation in order to work with, that's just not maintainable, especially as we go into more of an AI-based future. And Solid satisfies that. And as far as things go, Solid is the platform that is a good one to bet on, because Solid has the support of two national governments, the Belgian government and the UK government. Solid has companies like Graphmetrics and like Inrupt behind it that are working on getting a lot of partners to buy into it. Solid has a big community of people who not only are interested in just Solid, but you could also extend that out to the community of semantic web people who might be interested in this. So instead of creating a whole new platform or hopping on one of the smaller ones, it's best to take what has the best probability of success and to roll with that. And Solid satisfies everything that's needed when it comes to the goals of interoperability. So Solid's the place to go. It also helps that I also was just involved early on in the Solid project, so there's a bit of a head start there.
Nice. Now, so these Solid are open standards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they, how much does it cost? Kind of question.
How much do the standards
How much does
cost?
Solid cost? If I want to do Solid apps, servers, products, how much do I have to pay to get Solid?
To get, nothing. Like you
Nothing.
can get an
Okay.
experimental server right now on inrupt.net, solid.community, or solidweb.org. I think that there's also, Inrupt has an experimental server for free. They've got an enterprise server at, I think it's signup.podspaces.inrupt.com. And then Nextcloud, which, if you're familiar with it, that's a personal storage solution. They also have an interoperable pod server. So if you wanted a pod, completely free. Same goes for an identity server, and then also completely free if you want to start developing Solid applications. All the libraries are open. And then if you want to build new things based on the Solid spec is completely open. If you go to solidproject.org/tr, that will show you the specification if you are one of those people who just wants to read all the docs. And in that case, if you are one of those people who wants to read all the docs, then I want to talk with you because I think that you're probably a good developer.
Nice. And of course, Graphmetrics has Solid pods, both free
Yes,
and
yes.
yeah.
So Trim pods
okay.
are coming out.
Trim pods, yeah, almost at the same time as this video. So, okay, and yes, okay. So now, okay, so we have data, and today one of the big problems around the world is hackers and data security. So if I'm going to have a pod with all my data on it, or even my company or my project, my construction project or any other project, legal documents, financial documents, all of this on my pod, and then we know there are hackers galore everywhere, right? We have, I won't mention any countries, but there are, I think all countries, I was going to say China, but I'm sure US and Norway and, we all hack each other somehow, it seems like, right? Now, I don't know about this, but it seems like that to me. So what do we have in the for security here?
Yeah. So again, one of the benefits of the Solid ecosystem is the fact that it is based on proven technology. So you can secure a Solid pod the same way you would secure any other kind of centralized ecosystem. So you have you won't have new kinds of problems like how a blockchain could have a 50% plus one attack. So your Solid pods your Solid pods can be secured in the exact same way. Make sure that you have a good encryption at rest. Make sure that you have encryption in transit. Make sure that human engineering isn't a problem. I used to work for a company called Area 1 Security, which protected against phishing attacks. And phishing attacks account for about 90% of all breaches in general. So you can apply the same kind of protection for phishing attacks that you would for a centralized system to Solid. Now, there is one interesting story that I can say about securing Solid that it
Let us
doesn't
hear.
apply to centralized systems. And that is how we secure your identity and the identity tokens. So usually, under an OIDC standard, you would communicate with a web server, with an identity server, to get a token, and then you use that token to query what is called a resource server, and that's where all of your data is stored. Now, under traditional OIDC, the identity server and the resource server are owned by the same entity, which means that when I get the token, I can send it to the resource server, and the resource server can trust it. However, under Solid, the identity server and the resource server might be different. So for example, I might sign into my identity server, but maybe I want to get a social media post or a chat message that my friend has on their server. So that means that I'm taking a token that was generated by my identity server and sending it over to my friend's server. Now, this is cool if my friend is a good person, but what happens if I accidentally send that token over to an evil person? Well, under the traditional system, that evil person could then take that token and pretend to be me, and then just query whatever they want to steal all of my data. But Solid protects against this with an addition to the OIDC standard called DPoP. It stands for Decentralized Proof of Possession. And the way that works is for every request that an application makes to a server, it generates a new token called the DPoP token. And the DPoP token says, this token can only be used for this specific request to this server. That way, when we send a request to that server, if it's an evil server, it might have the DPoP token, but it can't use that DPoP token to talk to other servers, because that DPoP token is only bound to the request to the evil server. So that's one interesting story about how
that's huge,
an additional level
right?
of
Because
security.
I think recently even the U.S. government systems were hacked, and if I understand it right, it was related to a token that had a longer, that somebody got the token and they got into the systems as part of how it was hacked. So with the DPoP, they couldn't do that, because then every request would need a new encrypted token, right?
Yeah, well, maybe. I'm not necessarily
Think so,
sure about that specific thing.
right?
It's possible. Was there did someone did like InRep write an article on this specifically? And maybe I missed that article.
No, not. I heard from Frederick actually that
Okay.
that was how it was hacked, but I'm not 100% sure.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, potentially. I'm not necessarily, because I don't know a lot about the government hack. I'm not necessarily qualified to say whether or not DPoP could have defended against that. But yeah, potentially.
Okay, so so what else? So I've asked you some questions, but what would you like to sort of get out there as a message or information about Solid or anything else really? I mean, it's open.
Well,
Do you have any?
so I guess I'll just plug all my ads then.
Plug.
So
Yeah.
you can download and start chatting in Liqid Chat. Go to either liquid.chat, liqid.chat. Look it up in the App Store. Look it up in the Google Play Store. We've got
I'll make sure we have a link in the video.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We've got public chats that you can get involved in, so you don't even need to already have friends on Solid. And then also every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I publish new videos about Solid. They're very short, 1-minute explanations of Solid. I put those on my YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and also on TikTok. Not necessarily sure if TikTok is the best platform.
We actually love
forwarding.
We actually love those videos, and we put them on our own channels, just so you can find them there and just click and go to Jackson, and make sure you do a thumbs up. That really matters when it comes to this social media. A little thumbs up or a little comment on Jackson's videos, and then what happens is, of course, the algorithms kick in, and more people will get those videos up in their searches or their browsing. So make sure you check those out. They're really cool, and unlike this, it's like a long format video, but those are all like super short, like a minute, or what are they? A minute about?
Yeah, they have to be under a minute, or I can't upload them to TikTok.
Okay, so under minutes. Yeah, nice. Okay.
And then
Yes.
another thing, I host a monthly gathering of people in Solid just to do networking. That's where we all
you do
get
that.
in, we introduce ourselves, we talk about what we're working on. The next one, I believe, is April 30th, so I can send
Okay.
you the link on that. And then
Yeah, we'll post that.
finally, the upcoming the May Solid World, I will be presenting Liqid Chat. So be
Nice.
sure to tune in to have a more formal presentation about Liqid Chat.
Right. So we'll have a link to that. So the Solid World is a monthly that where the Solid communities are talking about updates, and people like Jackson will talk about their project. We've Graphmetrics earlier talked about what we're doing, and usually Tim Berners-Lee is there, and giving little updates. So that's really great. We'll have a link to that. So if anybody wants, it's free, and it's once a month, and and then Jackson will show his chat app in May,
Woo.
beginning of May. What is that? What is the date? It's first. Is it 1st of May?
I can.
No, it's first something of May. First
It's
weekday. I
the
forget.
first Thursday of May. Yeah, so this
First
is
Thursday of May. Okay.
Thursday,
First
May
of May.
6th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
All right. So that is Jackson Morgan, a solid enthusiast. I think clearly I can say after this interview, and an expert. Thank you very much for all your insights, and I really hope all the best for your Solid apps, and that as many as possible go to your chat app, Liqid Chat, and start chatting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.